In December 1957, a teenager and his girlfriend made their way across Nebraska and Wyoming, taking the lives of 11 people over the period of 2 months. But how did a seemingly ordinary American teen go from your average teenager to a rampaging psychopath? Charles Starkweather was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. He was the fourth of 7 children of his father, Guy, and his mother Helen Starkweather. Charles belonged to a working-class family. His father was a carpenter who was often unemployed due to arthritis in his hands. To make ends meet and keep the entire family afloat, Helen, Charles's mother, worked as a waitress. Charles's father was a cruel man. He admitted that he smashed his own son into a window. His wife, Helen, also divorced him later on the grounds of cruelty. Charles might not have any fond memories of his family, but his school life wasn't any good either. He attended Saratoga Elementary School, Irving Junior High School, and Lincoln High School. The reason Charles never fit in his school was because he was born with a birth defect which caused his legs to be misshapen. He was also bullied mercilessly because he had a type-on communication disorder. He was so badly taunted that as he grew older and stronger, he made his gym classes his outlet for all the rage built over the years. The tables soon turned and Charles started to bully the kids who used to bully him in the past. This behavior quickly turned into rage against anyone he hated. Charles was often described as a kind and well-behaved teen, but he soon became the most troubled teen out there. He was so troubled that his own family were afraid of his violent outbursts. Eventually he dropped out of his high school and took a job at a newspaper warehouse to pay his bills. It was while working that he met Carol and Fugate. Charles and Carol quickly became close. Charles taught Carol how to drive, and on one such day she crashed the car which belonged to Charles's father, which ended up in Charles's banishment from the family home. He then took up job as a garbage collector. During garbage pickups, he began developing a nihilistic worldview, believing that his current situation was the final determinant of how he would live the rest of his life, while striving only to satisfy his biological needs and acquire power over others. He also began plotting bank robberies and home robberies. But his real-life ending streak started when he committed his first homicide. On November 30, 1957, Charles was trying to purchase a stuffed animal from a local gas station on credit, but the young attendant refused to sell anything on credit, which made Charles very angry. Charles robbed the gas station with attendant held at a gunpoint. He drove the attendant to a remote area, where Charles shot attendant several times in the head. This incident marked the beginning of the rampage by Charles Starkweather alongside Carol and Fugate. On January 21, 1958, Charles went to Carol's home. There he was confronted by Carol's mother and stepfather, Velda and Marion Bartlett. They told him stay away from their daughter. In response he shot both of them, ending their lives. Carol also had a half-sister who was just 2 years of age at the time. Charles strangled and stabbed the poor baby, ending her life. He hid the bodies in an outhouse and chicken coop behind the house. Carol's involvement in the incident is still up for debate. She insisted that she was never a participant and Charles held her as a hostage. The couple remained in the house with a sign on the front of the window saying to not enter because they all were sick with flu. The pair finally made a run for it on January 27 when police were alerted by Carol's suspicious grandmother. When police broke into the house, it was in apparent order, but a few days later Charles's brother Rodney and his friend Bob Vaughn Bush searched the house and the premises. Finding the stashed bodies, the police issued an alert to arrest both Charles and Carol. Charles took Carol to farmhouse of 70-year-old August Meyer, who was his family's friend, living in Bennett, Nebraska. There he shot the man with a shotgun shell to the head, also unaliving August's dog. And when the duo attempted to flee the scene, Charles drove their car into mud and abandoned the vehicle. It was then the duo met Robert Jensen and Carol King, two local teenagers who stopped to help them by giving a ride. Charles forced them to drive back to abandoned storm cellar in Bennett, where he rewarded their generosity by shooting Jensen in the back of his head and attempted to S.A. Carol, but failed, due to which he became angry and shot her as well. The two then fled the scene once again in Jensen's car. They drove to a wealthy section of Lincoln, where their next stop was the home of industrialist C. Lauer Ward and his wife Clara. Charles stabbed their housemaid Ludmila Fenkel, ending her life, and then waited for Lauer and Clara to return home. Charles also unalived their family dog by snapping its neck to keep it silent. Clara arrived home first and alone, only to get brutally stabbed by Charles. Later in the evening, when Lauer returned home, Charles shot and ended his life. While they were still camping out in the house, newspaper came with their pictures on the front page, which they cut out. These cutouts were later found when they were arrested. They robbed the house and haphazardly searched for a new getaway vehicle. The incident with the Ward family caused an uproar. Law enforcement agencies in the region sent their officers on a house-to-house search for the culprits. After several sightings of Charles and Carol were reported, vigilante gangs were formed and local Sheriff Merle Carnop armed men he found in bars. Now needing a new car because Ward's Packard was identified, the couple came across a traveling salesman, Merle Collison, who was sleeping in his Buick along the highway outside Douglas, Wyoming. Merle was awakened only to be fatally shot by the couple. Charles claimed that Carol pulled the trigger, but Carol said otherwise. The salesman's car had a unique brake mechanism which was unfamiliar to Charles. In his attempt to drive away, the car stalled because the brake had not been released. He tried restarting the engine and, in the process, a motorist, geologist Joe Sprinkle, stopped to help. Charles threatened Joe with his rifle, and in that moment, Natrona County Sheriff's Deputy William Romer arrived on the scene. Carol ran to him yelling something along the lines, "It's Starkweather. He is going to kill me." Charles drove off and was involved in a car chase with the officers and sheriff. A bullet fired by the officers shattered the windshield and the flying glass caused Charles to bleed, due to which he stopped and surrendered. Charles Starkweather was finally arrested on January 29, 1958, after almost 2 months of his first murder. Charles chose to be extradited from Wyoming to Nebraska after his arrest. He was charged with first degree for Robert Jensen at the time. Charles first said that he kidnapped Carol and that she actually had nothing to do with his rampage. However, he changed his story several times. He also testified against Carol at her trial, saying that she indeed was a willing participant in all of this. Carol always maintained that Charles was holding her hostage. Judge Harry A. Spencer did not believe her statements and determined she had numerous opportunities to escape. Charles's lawyers tried to argue that he was mentally insane, but the jury bought nothing of it, and ultimately, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Charles was executed in electric chair at the Nebraska State Penitentiary in Lincoln on June 25, 1959. Charles gave no last words, but in a letter from prison to his parents, he wrote, "Dad, I am not really sorry for what I did, because for the first time me and Carol have so much more fun." He was also reportedly indifferent about his impending demise and had become resigned to his fate. Carol was convicted as an accomplice and received a life sentence on November 21, 1958. She was paroled in June 1976 after serving almost 18 years. She married and changed her name, settling in Hillsdale, Michigan.